behind him. This is Joseph Mengele's son, making his, what else shall I say, first American television appearance. Not surprisingly, Rolf Mengele is not enthusiastic about talking about his father in public. What did he know about his father? Here is a picture taken in the Alps in the 40s. This is Joseph Mengele and his son Rolf. What you should know is that at the time this photo was taken, Rolf thought the man at his side was Uncle Fritz. Rolf Mengele saw his father on only 2 different occasions. This one at the age of 12, and then later, shortly before Joseph Mengele's death in 1979. Here, among other things, is just one Mengele story from his service in the SS at Auschwitz. After a while, a group of SS officers arrived on motorcycles, Mengele among them. They drove into the yard and got off their motorcycles. Upon arriving, they circled the flames. It burned horizontally. We watched to see what would follow. After a while, trucks arrived, dump trucks with children inside. There were about 10 of these trucks, and they had entered the yard. After they had entered the yard, an officer gave an order, and the trucks backed up to the fire, and they started throwing those children right into the fire, into the pit. The children started to scream. Some of them managed to crawl out of the burning pit. An officer walked around it with sticks and pushed back those who managed to get out. Hos and Mengele were present and were giving orders. The first group of children were from Dnepropetrovsk. I was told that the zone commanders that it was difficult to poison the children in the gas chambers, therefore they had burned in the pit. They were all under 5 years old. I had heard that they had been brought either an entire kindergarten or an orphanage from this city. Later I was told that some of these children that were brought and burned were actually taken from their mothers. During my work at the gypsy camp, I came across Mengele and watched his activities. I personally observed him infecting gypsy twins with typhus in order to observe whether the twins reacted differently or in the same way. Shortly after they had been infected, they were gassed. Do you believe that your father was responsible for this?
I have to agree that the witnesses are telling the truth, and you can imagine it is not very easy to believe it, but there is so much evidence, and so I really have to believe it. He didn't how do you say in English, he did not personally, he did not assume he did it. He thought he is a member of a concentration camp. He is not responsible for it because he did not invent the concentration camp. He thought he is on duty, it is an order, and he once, when he was visited by my mother, he said to her, I don't know who is responsible for all this, what is going on here. This my mother told me.
You talked to your father about this before his death, didn't you, Rolf?
I tried to talk with him about these subjects when I visited him in '77 in Sao Paulo. And I didn't ask him directly and somehow
right.
cross-checking.
Here's what you say. I propose that in your conversation with him, I propose that that whatever he or anyone else did or did not do in Auschwitz, I deeply detested it, you told him. And I regard Auschwitz as one of the most horrible examples of inhumanity and brutality. He said I did not understand. He went there, had to do his duty to carry out orders. Did he say that?
Yes.
He said everybody had to do so in order to survive, the basic instinct of self-preservation. He said he wasn't able to think about it. From his point of view, he was not personally responsible for the incident at the camp. He said he didn't invent Auschwitz. It already existed. You are here with Gerald Posner, an attorney who is, you're considered, you have to be one of the, certainly one of the most You have more scholarship on Mengele than perhaps anyone else alive. Your book is titled Mengele, The Complete Story. We should say that Rolf consented to appear with you on this program, and this doesn't make it a dishonorable exercise, but it obviously makes it a more absorbing, perhaps we'll get more information because of Rolf's presence, and I'm sure the publisher doesn't mind if we sell more books. Again, I don't want to be misunderstood, but this is obviously an arrangement whereby, is this Rolf's only appearance in America?
It's the only appearance that I know of on American television.
So he's obviously cooperated with you in the preparation of this book.
He has made himself available to myself and about a dozen other researchers around the world in Germany and England, and provided us information in terms of what happened between his father. And I think it is a much more interesting story by hearing the son's perspective on what this criminal was like.
Why didn't, if I say to you, why didn't you help? You had the entire world looking for your father, described as the most evil man in the world. And it was last year that we saw the grisly remains of your father's body unearthed, and television and still photographers swarmed around the skull. This was Joseph Menggele, who drowned, we are told, after having suffered a stroke while swimming
at a beach south of Sao Paulo
in Brazil. His final place of
hiding
while he was fleeing. Yes. He was especially nervous about the Israelis. The Israelis kidnapped Eichmann in Argentina.
1960.
In Buenos Aires?
Buenos Aires.
In 1960.
Yes.
He was living in Argentina at the time and took off.
Yes.
Eichmann first, me second. Would you, apparently you were not able to turn your father in, is that it?
It was not possible for me, no. It was a big conflict for me, but after all it was my father and I can't betray him.
But, you know, when I hear that, it was my father and I can't betray him, I could see somebody maybe saying, I'll be silent. My father's in South America, he's hiding, he's accused of these notorious war crimes. But nobody made Rolf Menggele affirmatively become part of the conspiracy that helped his father stay free. Rolf Menggele was part of that effort that kept Joseph Menggele free. If it wasn't for the Menggele family, Joseph Menggele would have been caught. He would have been in Israeli hands, and he probably would have been hung in the 1960s. It was only because the family made a concerted effort over the years to keep him free that it was successful. So I think he did more than just stay silent. He was also part of the conspiracy that helped him stay the #1 fugitive for 35 years.
I can't agree, Mr. Posner, that I was a part of the conspiracy. I was born in this situation, to being in this family. I learned by my mother that my father has no guilt. He just was a doctor there in the camp, helped the people. Then he had to flew away. I was forced to answer letters of him, a man who sent me stamps from Argentina. I didn't anything. I tried many times to forget it, to repress it, but it was not possible for me. And I just wrote some letters. I answered some letters to him in a way of pity, in a way of just human. As you write letters to a prisoner which is in jail, and at the end I decided to see once this man in South America, what was not very easy for me to go there and not to be followed up by hunters. I decided it as a personal challenge to have the opportunity to have the evidence if this all is right, what he is alleged to be done or not. I did nothing. What you can say, I did not tell his hunters where he is.
That you agree that you did not do that?
Yes.
So what you did was you committed an act of omission.
I would do it again like this. I would never betray my father. Never, and I have no one in the world can ask this to do me.
But it's more than just an act of omission, I think. And the reason it is more than an act of omission is although you only met him for 2 weeks as an adult in Sao Paulo in 1977, on your trip to Sao Paulo,
10 days.
You did take money, though, from the family, which helped him survive for that period of time. And more than that, I think, and something that I have great difficulty understanding, although legally in Germany you can't be prosecuted because it's not against the law to assist a criminal if he's a direct family member. Morally,
we are protected by law in Germany, yes.
But morally, when your father died in 1979, at that point I don't understand why you didn't say to the victims and the survivors, those looking for Mengele, looking for a ghost, the hunt is over, he's dead, you're looking for somebody that has now passed away. Why then, when he was dead, you didn't come out and announce it?
But you have, I talked with these people who at the end helped him to be hidden in South America. They wrote me the letter, he is dead now. I went there once again in 79, took his diaries, took just the belongings of him, and they told me, please don't tell anybody he is dead now, because they want to ruin our life, they will run after us. So I was in the next conflict.
They will run after us. Who? The people with whom he lived, or the family?
Yes,
the people with whom he lived.
Yes.
See, what it comes down
the Bossards and the Stammards in Sao Paulo. They said, please, we beg you, don't tell anybody. And so I was in the next conflict. I had liked that anybody knows it. He is dead now. It is not so easy just to tell to the people, to the press, he is dead. They will ask, give us evidence, give us proof. You have seen when his skull was found in Ambu in Brazil, they don't believe. They just believe now, after all, why? Because they have the X-ray and they have some anthropologist studies, and now they agree. But there are still people they don't agree because it's not the ending they look for.
One of the problems, I think, is, and Rolf Mengele is a perfect example of it, although he is to be commended to be the only member of the Mengele family that even cooperates with researchers, the rest won't even talk to him right now because he happens to be on shows like this. They've cut him off completely. On the other hand, he shows that the loyalty of the Mengele family has always been to Mengele first, and to those who assisted him in his fugitive life. And even though
a principle rooted in Germanic law.
Very much so. And so when
as we are not obliged to testify against ourselves, our Fifth Amendment protection, that protection is extended to entire families.
Yes.
Exactly. And here was essentially a dynasty in southern Bavaria, a very wealthy industrial family on the other side of the Mengele clan, and they watched out for their own interests. And even at the point where Joseph Mengele died, their interest was still in the loyal people that protected him, not to the twins, the survivors, and those who had gone through the camp.
I'm not part of this dynasty, Mr. Posner. I really must point out that I don't have any interest in the company. I have been cut off of the company, and I must sometimes really laugh if I learn this from the press or from the articles that I have a wealthy firm, a wealthy interest in this company.
He's been cut out from the factory. They really view him as the black sheep of the family, the farm employment.
This was founded by your grandfather.
Yes.
And survives today, does it?
Yes.
And it was that source of income that assisted your father's flight from those who were pursuing. Although Mr. Posner makes it clear that your father was apparently, he didn't receive vast amounts of money from this.
He didn't need it in South America. He was able to live in a very low-key atmosphere.
This saved his life. He was always, the people who hunted him, they looked for nice villas with Mercedes-Benz and shepherd dogs and bodyguards, and he lived in a little hut in a slum in Sao Paulo. So nobody of the so-appointed Nazi hunters have been looking there.
But he lived in a little hut in a slum of Sao Paulo near the end of his life. It should be pointed out that for the first 10 years in South America, he lived the high life in Argentina. He was going to the opera, he was going to the finest German restaurants in Buenos Aires. He was on the social scene. That's before
and using his own name.
And using his own name, and almost went into business with a Jewish business partner.
And American forces kept him under his own name in 1945 and held him for just a month in a prisoner camp, and he was then released under his own name in Germany.
He is alleged to have subjected a group of Polish nuns to extreme X-rays for research purposes, from which they suffered severe burns. He is alleged to have conducted bone marrow transplants, with the result that one victim had to have her right leg amputated. from the knee because it got infected. She was spared the gas chamber only due to the proximity of the Red Army and impending evacuation of the camp. He is alleged to have operated on the sex organs of male prisoners, supposedly to castrate or sterilize them. He is said to have had a number of women prisoners taken to the Black Wall, quotes, between blocks 10 and 11 of the main camp and shot. Their breasts were cut off and the muscles from the thigh were kept as cultivating material for experiments in Mengele's hygienic laboratory. He is said to have forced a mother, Ruth Elias, to cover her breasts with tape, quote, to see how long the baby could live without food, unquote. As the child grew weaker, she mercy-killed it after a compassionate nurse gave her some morphine in a syringe. He is said to have stood on pregnant women's stomachs until the fetuses were expelled. He is even said to have dissected a 1-year-old child while the child was still alive. This was the attempt by Joseph Mengele to learn how to promote a master race, wasn't that the...
He viewed himself as the leading edge of a new science, race science, and these young scientists, he was 32 years old at the time he went to Auschwitz. We all forget about that. We think of some bully in his late 60s who's there beating people. He was at the head of his class. He was one of their darlings. He was looked at by the rest of the Nazi medical hierarchy as one of the star pupils,
right.
And Auschwitz was for him a human laboratory.
Let's run through these pictures here, David, and we'll just make a break here. This is Joseph Mengele as he appeared in his SS uniform. These are photographs which are part of the historic biographical record of a man who was said to be the most evil man in the world. Now here are some questions for all of us. What does it mean to do one's duty, and what is our responsibility to our conscience, and how has our conscience been shaped? And where were the Western powers throughout the several years that this man fled capture and prosecution? With how much enthusiasm or lack thereof did the United States government throw its considerable weight into the search for Joseph Mengele? What do you say to people who claim to be sympathetic but think, enough already, I got my own problems, and that was 40 years ago? And what about the atrocities against my people? And what are your responsibilities to this? And would you turn your father in? And what about the Pope? What could he have done that he didn't do? What did he do that he shouldn't have done? And what about anti-Semitism today? Where does it live, and what are its manifestations? And is it growing? And if it is, what are you doing about it? And how is your silence different from someone else's doing their duty? And finally, how do you feel about Kurt Waldheim? And what should be this country's policy regarding this head of state who, like most of the heads of state of this planet, sometime or another, they wind up at state dinners at our White House. We'll be back in just a moment.